Hello and welcome to the Nightmare Podcast, the podcast series where we talk about horror movies and everything in the horror world. I'm your host, the Great Diggity Dane. Please enjoy the show. Hey, what's up, boys and ghouls? Yeah, so this week I went to go check out The Cocaine Bear. A really wild movie with a wild plot. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just get into this. The plot of this movie is inspired by the 1985 loosely based true story of a drug runner's plane crash, missing cocaine, and the black bear that ate it. This wild thriller finds an oddball group of cops, criminals, tourists, and teens converging in a Georgia forest where a 500-pound apex predator has ingested a staggering amount of cocaine and gone on a coke-fueled rampage for more blow and blood. Wild plot, but the movie, as much as I was waiting for this movie and excited about it, it let me down a little bit. But let's get into the things I liked and the things I didn't like about this movie. One thing I did enjoy, there was a couple performances that I really enjoyed. O'Shea Jackson, for instance, Ice Cube's son, he plays a character named David. And David is the only character I felt in this movie that felt like a fleshed out character. That, I mean, even though he was kind of goofy like the rest of them, he felt more grounded and like he was living in this world, not just like a comedian just kind of running around on stage. So his character was real good. Christian Convery, who played Henry. Henry's a little boy in the movie who has some interactions with the bear and another little girl. His comedic timing and tone and everything, it was very enjoyable. Made me laugh a bunch. You know, just anytime he was on screen, I felt like he stole the scenes he was in. There's even some scenes where he has to act a little bit more and not just be so comedic. And even then, I mean, he felt real believable. So I thought that kid had a great performance. Peter, played by Jesse Tyler Ferguson, he was one of the oddball characters, but for some reason worked for me. I just enjoyed his little like goofiness that he had. He was one of the goofier characters that I enjoyed. There were some other goofier characters that I wasn't a big fan of, but like I said, we'll continue on with these characters. Another character I really enjoyed was Kid. They called him Kid, and I think his nickname was Stash, played by Aaron Holiday. I loved his banter with Eddie, which is Alden Ehrenreich's character. Their little banter back and forth, if you listen to their little conversations, especially like in the background where they're walking with David and stuff. Like, they just have these funny little interactions that are pretty enjoyable and just kind of put a smile on your face when you hear these little remarks they got going back and forth. And he's just a character I really enjoyed. I thought he had some good little comedy moments where he would say a little something, or just the way he would act, or his face would look, or he'd have this expression on his face. A really funny character, so I really liked that kid too. Another great thing I liked in this movie, the kills are vicious. This bear, when he attacks people, he's ripping people apart. He's throwing legs, throwing limbs, climbing up trees. You know, he looks vicious every time you see him. He's very angry, and I guess that's what the cocaine's doing to him. But he's just a cool little character in the way he's so angry. And every time he's on screen, he's so scary. You know, there's never a scene where that bear's in that he is not like somewhere lurking, and you're worried like for these characters, like, oh, someone's gonna die. You know, so that was crazy. Every scene the bear was in was amazing, though. Now to the bad parts. As great as the bear was, his CGI is horrible. He does not look like a real bear. He looks like a fake bear every time you see him. But in a horror movie like this, I can give it kind of a pass, but it did bring me out of the movie sometimes, just to see how bad it actually was. A lot of the characters in the rest of the movie. I mean, there's so many characters in this movie. The movie feels crowded. There's so many characters and so many storylines going on. You know, I named a bunch of good performances that I loved. There's so many bad ones in this. I mean, some of the characters are just kind of throwaway characters. They're just there, meat to be grounded up by this bear. You know, that's all they are. They're just flesh and meat for this thing to kill. You know, and they give them stories. Like there's so many times where they have a character talking about a story, or they have a little storyline that's going on, and it leads nowhere because the character's gonna die. You know, so it's like, why waste our time with these characters? like I said, there's too many characters. There's also not enough bear. For a movie called Cocaine Bear, that bear is not there a lot. And I mean, in the commercials and different stuff that they put out for this movie, it always looked like there was going to be more of a funny tone to the bear itself. You know, where we could laugh a little bit with the bear and be like, okay, like he's doing cocaine, he's going to do some funny stuff, but then eventually he'll turn into this murdering bear. That wasn't the case. It was like, since the first scene, we're getting this bear is crazy, you know? He's going to kill people, he's tearing people apart, he's throwing people around. He's not here to play games, which is cool, but that's not what the commercials kind of told you. You know, they showed the funny little bear acting like Baloo and stuff, you know. No, this bear was nothing like Baloo. He was more like the Revenant bear, you know. Yeah, there was just way too many characters. Another thing I did not like is the pacing in this movie. For an hour-and-a-half movie, this movie feels a lot longer, and not in a good way. Like you get to a point where you're like, you know, an hour and a half should be a solid horror movie. I mean, whether it's a comedy horror or even like a darker horror or anything like that, hour and a half is usually pretty good. You know, we get in, we get out, get a premise, get some scary scenes, and we're good. This one, even though it's an hour and a half, it's like you get to a point, especially near the end of the movie, where it's dragging along. And you're like, hey, are we almost done here? Are we trying to make a serious movie? Are we trying to be a comedy? What are we doing? You know, all of a sudden we have like a father-son type of thing going on. You got this mom with these two kids, you know. You got like the guy with his friends, and you got the park ranger, and you got so many characters going on in here. And I don't think you needed that. I mean, I think you could have done it with just Henry and this other little girl that was there. That would have been a cool little story, just watching them go through this forest and try to stay away from this bear. Maybe have a few little side characters here and there, but it was like, no, you had too many main characters and too many storylines that are going along that are trying to wrap into one big story at the end. And I don't think you needed that in this movie. You know, you needed this movie to be just, you know, balls to the wall fun and just enjoyment all around and just craziness and wild antics and just wild scenes, you know? And I don't feel like you got that throughout the movie. I mean, there's some great scenes in this movie, but they're just not all there at the same time, you know? I mean, for instance, some of those scenes that I really love, like the first scene with Olaf and Elsa are the characters. These two hikers that are just climbing up a mountain, see the bear over there, you know, he's telling his wife, or I think his soon-to-be wife, it's his fiance in the movie, telling her, look at the bear, you know, the bear chases him down, grabs Elsa, drags her, rips her leg off, throws it at Olaf, you know. I mean, it's a cool little scene, and watching how vicious this bear is. I mean, not to mention, after listening to my daughter sing Frozen so many times, to watch Elsa get ripped to shreds by a bear was amazing. It was like that weird cynic in me that was like, Olaf, Elsa, I see what you're doing. Kill them both, you know? So that was kind of a fun scene. And like I said, just the viciousness and the goriness of the bear and some of the attacks. I mean, as soon as that first attack happened, I was like, whoa, this is the kind of movie we're getting into. I mean, I thought it was rated R. Just, you know, you're going to have kills and you have kids in it and you have drugs. But it was like, no, they had some gory scenes in it that were real cool. Another scene that's very enjoyable was that ambulance scene. I know you see it in the commercials, you know, the bears chasing down the ambulance and that. Well, that whole scene, the setup to that scene, and just the comedy that's going on, and yet the fear you have for these characters, because when you see that bear just, you know, he's got that cocaine in his system, and he's going all out, and he's chasing these characters, and he's attacking people. And I mean, even the ambulance scene, I mean, in that scene, you have the park ranger and you have two paramedics. The park ranger gets thrown out of the ambulance, face scraping across the cement. You know, her face is just ripping to shreds as she's gliding along the street. And then you have the bear attacking one of the paramedics. And then the other paramedic just decides, hey, you know what? I'm screwed. This bear's going to get me. She crashes into a tree and goes flying out the window. And it's just like these wild, gory, like graphic scenes that are like, whoa, I'm not expecting this from like a comedy horror like this, you know? But it was cool. I mean, it's almost like what I expected from Megan, some of the scenes, you know? But yeah, no, that scene was great. The little boy Henry, any scene he was in, like there's a funny scene with him and this character named Dee Dee, I believe her name is. You know, he's trying to act hard around her as a little girl. You can tell he probably had a little crush on her and stuff. And he's talking to her and he's telling her like, oh yeah, I do cocaine, I know what to do. And she's like, well, how do I do it? And he says, yeah, you're supposed to eat it, and they're sitting there eating cocaine. They're choking and coughing, and then he's like climbing up a tree trying to stay away from the bear. And like any little scenes he's in and the little banter he has with either Dee Dee's mom or with Dee Dee or any of the other characters going on, even the bear necessarily, like he's just got these little funny scenes and these interactions with the other characters that make him just enjoyable. I mean, every time he's on screen, you're kind of happy to see him, and his little accent is funny. Like, it's just a cool little boy. Any scene he was in, I liked. Again, all scenes with the bear in it. Like I said, when the bear is in it, even though the CGI is bad and there's not enough of him, any scene he's in, he is very scary. Like when you see him or he's about to be a part of a scene, somebody's dying. This bear is not playing games. He's coming through doors. He he almost has like a Freddy scene where one character is standing by a door and he reaches his paw in through the door and grabs him out through the window. It's like they really did some funny stuff with this bear, and his kills were fun. And any scene he was in was great. So I mean, I really enjoyed that bear. I think this is going to be a shorter review, especially because this movie, like I said, an hour and a half movie, and with the goofiness they had of these characters, it's just not. There's not enough like meat in this story to really do anything with. And I mean, you're not expecting a lot with a movie called Cocaine Bear, but for some reason they decided to not give you really anything. I mean, they gave you these goofy characters, let this bear rip them to shreds, and it's kind of like that's all you're there for. But you still don't feel satisfied when you leave it. You're like, yeah, I had a few chuckles in the beginning. I might have a few chuckles in the middle. The kills are great, but I also want a little bit more. And I don't know what that is. I don't know how you can fix that. I don't know if it's, do you really put the bear in more scenes, or do you give the bear more to do? Like do you have some kind of story or some kind of through line that's like, okay, let's see these characters do something. It just seems like they're all rolling around with their own stories and they don't mingle all together. And yet we get to the ending and it's just kind of like, hey, the bears are still out there, but everybody's kind of like, okay. I mean, the characters that died, but everybody else has just kind of moved on. It's just a weird ending and a weird way that this movie kind of just went along. And like I said, and for an hour and a half movie to feel a lot longer, and you get to the end and you're just like, how long was this movie? It felt like 2 hours. A movie like this should not feel 2 hours. When you watch some of these other horror movies that are, like this campy, like comedy horror, an hour and a half is a perfect time, and it gets you in there, it gets the kills you want, gets the laughs you want, and you come out feeling like, well, I really enjoyed that. This is a fun movie. I enjoyed it. I'd come back and watch it again. I don't know if I felt like that way about this movie. I mean, as much as I enjoyed it, and as much as a bear doing cocaine and going on this rampage seemed like a funny premise, and it seemed like something that would be right up my alley to enjoy, it really wasn't. It wasn't as much fun as I wanted to have. And like I said, a lot of that might have had to do with just so many characters in this movie. Like, there's so many characters that are thrown in here and little side stories that it's like that takes up all the time. And then the times you get with the bear are very short. They're great, but they're very short. And it's almost like they didn't have enough money to do this bear in all these scenes. But yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, I think in conclusion, looking at this, like I said, a 1.5 hour horror movie should be perfect. But it just feels longer towards the end of this movie than it had any need being. It did not need to be that long at all, or it didn't need to feel that long. They paced it horribly, and the lack of bear and just too many characters makes the movie feel crowded. Feels like there's not enough room to breathe. You're not letting any of these characters develop. You're not caring about none of them. You're seeing them ripped to shreds and you're like, okay, kill that character. They don't mean nothing to me. Let's move on to the next character. You're almost waiting for the kills now because you just don't care about these characters. I think the lack of the bear being in it really keeps this movie from feeling like an enjoyable comedy horror. You want to go into this movie and be like, okay, it's a comedy horror. I'm waiting to sit here and laugh. I want to be scared a little bit. I want to laugh a little bit. I want to enjoy my time. But they make the bear super scary when he is around, and the comedy just doesn't always hit like it should. You know, like the characters will have little jokes, they fall flat sometimes. You know, even at the end of the movie, I mean, you just kind of sit there and you're like, oh, that wasn't very good. You know, I don't know how I feel about it. Like it's there, but it's not great. It's just okay. You know, I did laugh a little bit in the beginning, and now near the end, I'm kind of bored. I just kind of wanted to end, and I'm not seeing what the point of this movie was. You know, and that's not good. Like, especially in a horror movie, when I end up like that, I feel like I wasted my time, you know? And I think I wasted my time with this movie especially. I mean, as much as I think it's an okay movie to see, I don't think it's a piece of junk, you know? There are some laughs, there are some good moments. Like I said, there's some great scenes in there. There's just not enough to make it a great movie or a great horror movie. I think overall, like I said before, like when I review a movie, I call it the body count. It doesn't mean how many actual dead bodies are in the movie, but it's just my rating system. And this movie, out of 100, I have to give it like a 55. You know, which is in my terms would be just above, like, you know, like a 50%er, I guess you would say. So it's just enough that I think it's enjoyable enough to watch, but I don't know if I can recommend it. I couldn't recommend it for everybody. I mean, you'd have to go see it in the theater, I think. If you watch it at home, I think a lot of the jokes will fall flat, and you'd find it kind of boring. If you're watching it in a social circle or with people that have the same type of sense of humor as you might enjoy it more. I mean, maybe drinking or something, you'd find it a lot more fun. I don't know. This is a really, really crazy movie. I mean, and not in a good way like I wanted it to be. Yeah, it was fun, but at the same time lacking, you know, and it's unfortunate. I really wanted to enjoy this movie a lot more. Yeah, I think that'll conclude the review for Cocaine Bear. Let's hope we get another better horror movies coming up. I mean, this was not one. I mean, even though the ratings are pretty high on it, I did not like it, guys. So remember, until next week, have sweet dreams and get ready for a new nightmare. All right, peace.